You're listening to Change Your POV Podcast, episode 56. What are things that you're doing now to help you in your evolution out of the military to be successful?
One thing that I'm doing is going to school. And, I think everybody should look toward education as long as tuition assistance and other factors are in play in the military. But another thing, and the thing I'm most excited about, is entrepreneurism. So I have a business that I've started with a buddy of mine.
Welcome to Change Your POV Podcast, helping you navigate transitions in your life, like entering and exiting college or the military, changing jobs or careers, and providing you with the coaching and mentorship needed to help you advance in your personal or professional life. Sometimes all you need is to change your point of view. Now, here's your host, Eddie Lazary.
All right, folks, welcome to Change Your POV. I am your host, Eddie Lazary, and today I am joined by Johnny Corson. He is an active duty Navy, what we call sailor, which is good. We don't get a whole lot of Navy folks on this podcast. I'm trying to diversify my portfolio, if you will. A couple of weeks ago, I actually had my first Navy guy on that also happened to be my cousin. And if you did not hear that episode, you can check that out. It's episode 44 with Brian Dunaway. He was on an aircraft carrier and worked on Hornets. Pretty cool episode. So welcome to the show, Johnny. Appreciate your time and thanks for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, so hoo-yah, Eddie.
There you go. Love it. Nice. So before we get into kind of what you're doing now, let's kind of take the wheel back a little bit. And I want to hear about the Johnny before the Navy. Like, was it something you planned to do? Did you just kind of fall into it? Like, what was your thought process, or how'd you end up in the Navy?
Well, Eddie, I come from Alaska and kind of grew up on the water. But as you know, there's no Navy base up there, so it wasn't like a huge military town. There was really no influence. My family, at least my direct family, had never been in the military. So really, as I started thinking about what I wanted to do after high school, the service kind of interested me. My parents always kind of instilled this sense of patriotism, and that really led me to look at the service academies. I applied to the United States Naval Academy, and in doing so, I had to kind of reach out, and the only place to do so was the enlisted recruiter. So when I did not get selected for the United States Naval Academy, you can imagine those recruiters, they did their job, and they got me. So
They snatched you up, right?
Yeah, they did.
Now, so talk to us a little bit about the kind of the enlistment process. I don't know how similar or different it is from that of the Army, which is the service that I was in. So is it basically the same thing? You take an ASVAB test, you score certain whatever, which kind of qualifies you for certain positions within the Navy? How does that work?
Yeah, that's how it works in general. And because the recruiting system is the way it is, what they try to do, and I don't mean to be, derogatory towards recruiters, but what they try to do is they try to bring you into these special programs, and they sell you a promise of, running and gunning, some high speed stuff. So I was a football player in high school, and I wanted to go to the academy, so they kind of ringed me into this special warfare group. So in doing so, I kind of had a different pipeline than some other people. I really had to get myself physically ready for that more so than I did for boot camp. So I took my ASVAB and then prepared myself physically for what was the PST. It's similar to what we call a PRT, but it included swimming and pull-ups among the other things.
Imagine that, a sailor that has to swim.
Right.
So what was the actual job or description or MOS that you entered?
It was SWCC, Special Warfare Combat and Craft Crewman. Whenever you see those high-speed videos about small boats and painted up warriors with huge guns on small boats, that's who you're talking about.
Oh, okay. And what's the primary mission of that force?
Some of it is extraction of SEAL teams, and some of it is maritime interdiction. So just outside of the normal scope of like kind of Coast Guardy type stuff, they do maritime interdiction everywhere in the world.
And is that what you're still doing today?
No, in fact, I failed that because, as you can imagine, that's not something I really wanted to do. It was something I was kind of pulled into. So the luster wore off, and had a poor experience there in training. So no, that's not what I do. Right now, I'm a career counselor, and I'm also a religious program specialist. So I work with Navy chaplains, and I've been in for just about 9 years.
Hmm. Yeah, and E6 you said, and in Army terms, what is that? That's a petty off. What is that?
That's petty officer first class.
Oh, petty officer first class. Okay. I'm familiar with the E6 and all that because that's the same everywhere you go. I'm not familiar with the actual ranks, but cool. And 9 years, yep, that's actually I don't know about in terms of Navy, but in the Army, E6 9 years is actually pretty good.
Well, I made E6 in 6 years, but in the Navy we say you choose your rate, you choose your fate. So advancement opportunity is different for each rate, and my rate just happened to be pretty good opportunities.
So career counselor. So is that is your primary focus counseling? Is it focused around like is it behavioral type counseling? Is it transitional out of the military? Is it family counseling? I mean, I can imagine career counseling can probably span a very large spectrum. Yeah.
It can, and some people need different things. So really, when they come to us, first and foremost, we kind of regurgitate all of what the Navy's kind of trying to get at these sailors. So retention is important. We need to inform sailors about the goals that they have and kind of staying in the military and advancement and the things that keep them in an up or out system. But what I've really enjoyed in the last couple of years is really the transition piece. I enjoy talking to people and seeing their eyes kind of light up when they think about what they're going to do when they get out, and they've got all these great plans. And so that's really kind of where I've focused in my last 2 years.
Now, is the sailors that come to see you is that on a voluntary basis? Is it part of a scheduled program? How do they come see you?
A little bit of both. We do have yearly requirements to sit down and chat about this kind of stuff. But when they come to see a career counselor, they've kind of got what we call the 80-20 rule. We spend 80% of our time on 20% of the folks because when it gets up to our level, we're dealing with some unique situations or trying to utilize Navy programs to get a person where they need to be.
Now, is most of your clientele primarily enlisted officer, or is it about equal?
Enlisted, we
Okay.
do 99% of us, our work is enlisted.
And then would you say that would be primarily junior NCO and below?
Probably, and then you get to retirements and some other special ceremonies that we handle for those who are on their way out on the other side of the spectrum.
Cool. And across the board, what would you say would be the kind of the common themes or common threads of issues that sailors are facing today?
Well, preparing to get out or lack thereof, I'm constantly amazed at the sailors who come to my office and they've done their 4 years. They've known they're gonna just do their four and get out, but in doing so, they just kind of lacked that preparation. And when I start probing, hey, where you're gonna go, what school you're gonna go to, where you're gonna live, a lot of it is the same type of answers, and it's like, well, I'll figure it out, And gosh, it's like a shake my head moment there.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that you say that because, as a matter of fact, this coming Tuesday, I've got episode 48, which is coming out, and I interview a Coast Guard officer named Travis, and it wasn't in the episode. It was in an email that he sent me today. I had sent out a message on Facebook that, oh, actually, he was commenting on my podcast episode that came out on Friday about currently serving and those that are transitioning out of the military. And he sent me an email and he says that's a very unique perspective about if you're not ready to get out of the military, your best option is to reenlist and to stay in, which I agree with. But he said, and this is very interesting. He said the issue is defining ready, right? So the recommendation from you and from others is, hey, if you're not ready, staying in is an option. But how do you know, or how does one know when they're actually ready or prepared enough to exit?
Well, I think to that point, anyone could separate and do well. I think it's our job as career counselors and generally as leaders to give these sailors perspective and just kind of ask these questions so that they can go home and answer them for themselves. So I think really what it comes down to is if a person looks in at the military and they see a lack of upward mobility, or they didn't like that their leaders yelled at them, or you hear it a lot. And the common response to that from leadership, which I disagree with, is, well, you're going to get that in the civilian world too. You're going to, hey, that's going to be the same wherever you go. And while that's true, not everyone's cut out for the military, and that, like I said, that preparation is key.
How much does your office as a career counselor extend to those post-military? I mean, can guys and gals that get out that come see you and then they transition out and then they have a question or they need help, do they have the ability to come back to you and seek some additional guidance and help, or once they separate, that communication is kind of severed?
Well, there's a different set of individuals who are uniquely capable of taking care of those individuals who have already separated. The people that I do kind of keep in contact with are usually those that have separated, and I'm interested to see, 1 year or 2 years down the road, how did this guy implement his plan, or where maybe did he fail, and can I learn from that and give that feedback to other sailors. So not typically do they come back to us after they've separated, but there are separation counselors that can take care of any individual after they've separated.
Cool. That's awesome. What things are you doing now while you're in? And I'm talking to you personally now, you're active duty. What are things that you're doing now to help you in your evolution out of the military to be successful?
One thing that I'm doing is going to school. And, I think
Mm.
everybody should look toward education as long as tuition assistance and other factors are in play in the military. But another thing, and the thing I'm most excited about, is entrepreneurism. So I have a business that I've started with a buddy of mine. Um, and that's really kind of that transitional piece. I can start it now. I can build it in a safe environment while also having a fixed income. And then when I get out, that's when I can devote more time and energy and let that be my transition.
And I'll echo that too as well, Johnny. Having separated from the military, I tried my hand at entrepreneurship and started my own business. But I started it, full bore. I didn't have the safety net of trying it on the side while I still had, gainful employment. And I failed miserably. And so I'm not saying that folks can't get out of the military and be successful at starting their own business. However, the education is a huge piece, and the second piece I would say, if you're interested in becoming an entrepreneur and starting your own business, then good on you. I highly recommend, finding perhaps, a full-time job and building that business on the side, kind of on your free time. That way you do have some ability to grow a little bit more organically. Because in my experience, when I started my own business, and I relied on it, I relied on it 100% to pay my bills, to put food on the table, to pay my employees, all of that. And oftentimes it was so stressful and money was so tight that I was forced into making decisions that I probably wouldn't have made, have I been, if I had that more of an on the side type of business and had kind of a fallback
Right.
income. So, what would you say to that recommendation?
Well, for those that are separating within a year or so, they've got that full-time employment. But as you think about it, and you mentioned that a lot of times sailors will say, "Hey, I'd like to start a business, when I get out." And I think you're right that that mentality of separating and then starting a business, there's a stark contrast between the security that the military offers financially, and then also the uncertainty of entrepreneurism. So I would highly recommend that course of action.
Hmm. Yeah, and another piece of this too that I just have to throw out there, and that is this: if you want to get into entrepreneurship, owning your own business, because if I were to ask you, Johnny, if I were to ask you why do you want to own your own business, what would you say?
I would say that, I see myself as a leader first, and then second, I see this product and this customer base that I think I can improve on. So I think those two factors are the most important to me.
Yeah. So I what I'm hearing you say is you're interested in pursuing a passion that adds value. That's what I'm hearing you say,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's so important because sometimes when you ask the question of somebody, why do you want to start your own business? If you get the answer back because I want to make lots of money, um, that to me is lots of red flags because I mean, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying that you can't make lots of money owning your own business. That's the goal, right? That's the ultimate kind of thing. But if that's the only reason you're getting into self-employment, I'm here to tell you, you're going to be sadly mistaken because you first you first need to figure out that you want to be in business for yourself. One, because you're passionate about whatever it is you want to do. Two, because you want to provide value and service, some demographic or some element, folks, whatever. And then three, just so happens that you're going to make some money along the way anyway. So that's key. I've known people that have started their own business with nothing but dollar signs in their eyes and failed miserably because that they were pursuing the wrong goal there.
Right.
Now, you mentioned education. I'm a huge proponent of education. I didn't think so when I was in the military. I did not take any college while I was in.
Yikes.
Yeah. One, I didn't think I could. Two, I didn't think I had enough time to. Three, I didn't think I needed it. So many reasons and excuses I can't even begin to tell you. And then when I finally got out and I realized, oh man, there's a lot of jobs out there. No matter how good I was, there's a lot of jobs out there. That's like that's just the entry gate, the degree, right?
Right.
Just to get into the door, let alone having a chance at the position. That's just kind of a point of entry. There is that degree, and not in all cases, but more and more these days it seems to be the case. But even if I were interested in taking some college when I was in, I was faced with what a lot of folks are faced with, and that is I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure what career I wanted to pursue. I wasn't sure what industry I wanted to be in. Because let's face it, I joined the Army right out of high school, and I was in combat arms. I was a forward observer, and I blew shit up for a living. I had no idea about any type of job or industry when I got out, so I didn't know what I wanted to do. What would you say to those that are currently in that they know they should get some education, but they're not too sure about what they want to do when they get out?
Well, have you ever heard of general eds? Those are the classes that everyone essentially has to take. And I think when you're starting off, you can start with that general education requirement. And even college students that are full time that don't come into the military, sometimes they change their degree 5 or 6 times before they graduate. And that's okay for military members to do that. And in fact, because you start with your general educations, you have a little bit more latitude, as you age and as you become more experienced and decide what you want to do for yourself.
Excellent answer. In your opinion, what are some key elements missing from new recruits entering the military today?
Well, I would say a little bit of humility, and
Mm.
I would count myself as the Generation Y, the WHY, and I'm kind of on the first spectrum of that. And now, as I've kind of grown through the military and as a leader, I can see new recruits come in, and first, I'd like to see that they start somewhere. You got to be a good follower to be a good leader, but too many of them are trying to jump right up there and skip those steps.
Yeah. So, are you one of those damned millennials?
That was a good one, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all over Facebook. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I don't totally agree with a lot of what people say about. I think classes of folks based on their age is a misrepresentation. You are what you are, and you are who you are. I don't really care, how old you are. But you're right. There is some sense of lack of discipline, I think, amongst young folks today, and I don't know if that's really the fault of the military, easing up on standards within in boot camp. I don't really know, or if it's just the way that we're raising our kids these days. I'm not sure. I've got a 20-year-old son, and I'll tell you that he was raised a lot differently than I was raised, and I suspect when he has kids of his own someday, he will raise those kids differently than I raised him. So I don't know if there's any right, wrong way of doing it, but the world's definitely changing. That's for sure.
Right.
All right. So if you had one do-over in your military career, what would you say it would be and why?
Well, I told you that I applied to the United States Naval Academy, and even though I joined enlisted, I knew that there was a possibility of again applying. And in fact, my first duty station, I met a chaplain who was an academy grad. He was a pilot turned Jewish Orthodox rabbi. And there I was in a position where I could have utilized him to apply again to the academy as a young, unmarried junior sailor. And I think that would be the do over, is just really keep pushing forward for what my ultimate goal was.
Nice. So I know you haven't transitioned out of the Navy yet, but in your opinion, what do you think would be some of the things that you'll be able to carry with you or carry forward with you out of the military to help you be successful in the civilian world?
My job requires a little bit of jack of all trades, and I think that the employment opportunities out there right now are so varied, and they ask you to do so many things. I think the military sets us up. We have collateral duties in the Navy because you can only put so many people on a ship. Everyone's got to have 2 or 3 jobs. And I think that really sets up service members because they're used to that. There are those that are out there in the civilian community where they have their 3 things that they do. They do them very well, but they're not willing to, kind of budge left or right. And as a business owner, I want to see an employee do that. I want to see someone kind of reach out, step out, maybe do something a little bit outside their comfort zone.
How do you define success?
Well, I think success coincides with a sense of contentness, and sometimes, and I like to see that some people will take less responsibility or take less of a paycheck and still be content. And I think in some circumstances that could equal success. When you kind of have that sense that everything's going well, it's okay. This is where I want to be.
I like that. So now, all right. So we're gonna start getting into your entrepreneur ventures here. But before we dive in, I do got to ask a question since you do have that entrepreneurial spirit, and a lot of people that are listening to this are also either veteran or not veterans, are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. So they're interested in this question. And that is this. So when you're pursuing a goal or a dream or a project and it starts to fail or become more difficult than you thought, how do you know when it's time to pull the plug or keep driving? Like, for example, when you're doing something, I've seen people, right, where they're pursuing something, and I just kind of sit back and think, oh my God, they should just really give it up because they're just wasting their time. I don't even know why they're doing it. But then there's other people that they start something and they quit far too early, and you think, oh my God, if they would have just kept going, they would have had something.
Sure.
So when you're in that spot, everyone that's an entrepreneur will find themselves in that spot, and it's a tough spot to be in because you're not sure if you could just need to keep pushing through and make something of it, or if you just need to bail out and move to something else. What do you think?
Well, I think you hit it on the head there, Eddie. I think that when those around you who love you and who know you and who want to see you succeed start to say, "Hey, man, maybe this isn't working out, or maybe you should, in my world, it's called pivot. Maybe you should kind of look somewhere else. Use your skills that you've developed here and shift left or right." I think that's when okay, it's time to drop this. When everyone else around me is looking at it, I think there are certain circumstances that could lead a person to take that next step and grow out of that.
Mm, I like that, and that kind of ties right into this next piece, and that is influencers in your life. In order to be successful, no matter whether you're in the military, in the civilian world, wherever you're at, and whatever you're doing, you can't really be successful on your own. You could try, but you really need others around you and in your life. So, who's been influential in your life for your success?
I would say every person that has had a hand in bringing me through the military has taught me something, whether that's something to do or to not do. But for key individuals, I'd say my parents influenced me when I was growing up, and they kind of gave me the keys and then let me go. And then also my wife, I really lean on her to give me kind of that sanity check every so often, and it's right on every time.
Yeah, I totally concur with that, man. My wife's the same thing. I just wouldn't be the man I am today without her, for sure.
Right.
All right, let's talk about Blue Jacketeer. Am I saying that right?
You are.
All right, so I'm looking at bluejacketeer.com. So those of you that are listening, you can head on over and check that out while we're talking about it. Very slick website you have here. And I've got a lot of questions because I understand the concept, but I don't understand the terminology, and that's just because that's just the difference between the branches of service, which is perfectly fine.
Right.
Anybody that's in the Navy will be able to hop on here and be like, "Oh, I know exactly what that is."
Right.
And I'm looking at it going like, I have an idea what that is, but I'm not entirely sure. So I'm going to describe for you what I interpret this to be, and you let me know whether or not I'm on point.
Okay.
So Blue Jacketeer is a website that folks that are in the Navy that are interested in studying for their advancement exam can come to, and there's a couple different options. They could try out some free stuff. They can opt in to pay for the full version, and it basically takes them through like this really comprehensive study guide, complete with questions and etc. And it was created for sailors by sailors. And it looks to be like you guys probably spent a good amount of time putting all this together. So before we get into any further, how did I do?
You did pretty well.
All
You did
right.
pretty well.
So is this primarily for now? Again, I'm sorry if I'm sounding ignorant here with
That's
regard
all
to
right.
the Navy.
I forgive you.
Um, so I know how the Army works, and I vaguely know how the Marine Corps works because my co-host on Friday episodes, Bennett, served in both the Army and the Marine Corps, so he's been kind of my interpreter, if you will, to navigate all things Marine Corps. But so the Navy. So do officers and enlisted both have advancement exams, or only enlisted?
It'll just be enlisted.
Okay. And what pay grades or what ranks? Now, do you have to take exams? Going from E1 to E2, E2 to E3, or is that pretty much time and grade, time and service? And then once you get into your NCO, your petty officer ranks, then it's exams. How does that work?
Yeah, you're right. So from E3 to E4 is an exam. E4 to E5 is an exam, and E5 to E6 is an exam. So that's three regular exams, and those happen twice a year. They happen at the same time. They happen in March and September every year through 2 cycles a year. And then the difference then is E6 to E7, you take a test, but it's only once a year. It's in January, and it accounts for a little bit larger portion of the advancement criteria.
Okay, so are these exams then mandatory, or are they just for those that are interested in promotion?
Well, you can opt out, but most people do take their exam.
And before you created this, what's been what's called the traditional method for studying for these exams?
Eddie, everyone has their way of studying, and if you ask 100 people, you're going to get 100 different answers about what worked for them. So there are a few competitors out there. They kind of focus in a different aspect of the study habit, and we kind of just approached it from an angle that we feel works best.
Okay, you say we. So who's this other we in your
Uh,
business
So
venture?
Alan Wood is my business partner, and he just separated from the military, so he's really looking forward to the next couple months hitting this head on and being that full time guy.
And I'm assuming Navy as well?
He is. He is Navy.
Yeah. So how did you guys meet?
Well, to tell you how we met, I got to tell you about a failure of mine. So, about a year and a half ago, I started an app for kids. It was designed by me, but I had a couple people kind of come in and produce it. And it was a children's app. It is. It's called Quiz Hero. You can find it on the App Store. It's free, and it really kind of gamifies the educational experience for children. We go over math, literacy, science, and that kind of thing. So in doing that project and that business as I built it up, I realized that kind of wasn't for me. It wasn't taking off like I had that pie in the sky dream it would, and in doing that, I met Alan as he was starting Blue Jacketeer. So we were kind of both starting these projects around the same time, and just kind of conversating back and forth about what to do and what not to do and lessons learned. And so that's kind of where we started chatting.
So you met him through, was he part of the development team for Quiz Hero or?
No, I was actually looking at other products, and then just obviously the first place I'm going to look is the advancement exam. I know that sailors have to learn this stuff, I assumed that they probably went online to find some resources, and I wondered if there was a game out there that did the same thing for sailors. I realized there wasn't, and the closest thing to that, the best product that I saw was Blue Jacketeer, this little fledgling website that at the time served a completely different audience.
Okay, so this was in existence and you kind of stumbled across it and then just reached out to him.
Yep.
Is that how it worked? Okay. All right. And where is he located?
He just moved to the Pacific Northwest.
And you guys have been working together for how long now?
Unofficially about a year and a half, but we started our business officially a couple months ago.
Nice. And I remember you mentioning to me in our previous conversation leading up to this interview that you've actually never met him in person.
Right, right. We've never met in person.
And I bring that up. It's very interesting to me, and I bring that up for a couple reasons. One, because some listeners out there may not even know this, but Bennett and I, we've actually never met in person either. And for a lot of folks out there, you're going to find that probably pretty amazing.
Right.
How two guys can work so closely together on the same project and have never actually met. And that's true. We've never actually met in person. We've talked plenty. Obviously, we do, podcasts together. We've got other business ventures that we're working on the side, which will remain nameless until we unveil them. But it's absolutely feasible in today's day and age to find somebody that is in the space or in a space that you're interested in moving to, or interested in, or passionate about, and it's and you can work and collaborate and join forces with people from pretty essentially anywhere in the world, and carry on these very lucrative businesses and never even actually have met them in person, as which is that's just awesome
Right.
because there's folks out there that are looking to get out of the military and they're very interested and passionate about something. They know they're moving home either to their home of record or they're moving, somewhere else, and they're like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find somebody to help me with this or that's passionate about this. So what would you say to those that are interested in something they know they want to do or at least try, but they don't want to go it alone and they want some help, they want somebody else to kind of partner with? How would you recommend that they go about finding somebody else?
Well, there are a lot of networking opportunities in the military and veteran entrepreneurship opportunities as well. And I would say just dig into that space. Like you said, if that's where you want to be, if that's something you're interested, a lot of people like the tech space. And so that's not actually my cup of tea, but I understand that there's a necessity to have a technologically sound product. So that's sort of what I did is I looked at what's the best tech out there and how can I incorporate myself or work with a current business owner and just add my skills, some value added experiences that I've had in my failure.
Cool. Now every sailor listening to this right now is just biting it to bit. I can hear it right now. They want to know more about Blue Jacketeer. So I kind of went through kind of the top level. Why don't you give us a rundown and really give us an in-depth look into what Blue Jacketeer is, does, and can do for you?
Okay. So first and foremost, Blue Jacketeer is online. Some of our competitors they focus on printing out material and sending it to the individual, and you can imagine that time between ordering the material, receiving the material, and then kind of going through that material. I, we consider that an antiquated system, especially as everybody has their cell phone in their hand right now. So what we did is we built a mobile-friendly website, and by we I mean Alan. He really kind of led all the technology in this venture. So what I like is that our service that we offer is mobile friendly, and that's again something that our competitors are not doing yet. Uh, so we focus on getting our product to the person with the device that they're holding in their hand or that they use the most. And so what our product is a series of quizzes that we've created that we've hired other subject matter experts to dig through the material that's already available and just kind of glean the stuff that they've seen on these exams and then throw it into a quiz site that we can then sort in a way that it's called spaced repetition. And that's really the system and the format that we use to generate these questions and get a person through so many questions in 2 or 3 months. But it's a system that's proven in the industry and through education space in general.
So describe spaced repetition. What does that mean?
Spaced repetition is similar to so you've got a flashcard deck, right? And you go through the flashcard and say you got this one question, you get it wrong. Well, you're going to put it in a pile somewhere where you want to get back to that question. Those ones that you get right over and over and over, you don't need to see those again. Now, there is a set of spaced repetition that wants you to bring that back maybe every so often, but it's not going to happen as often as those questions that you got wrong continually. And so that's really the crux of the issue, is that if you just go through a quiz, 100 questions, you go through that quiz over and over and over, eventually it's like playing a CD. You know the next song. You know what's going to happen. So if you already got that system down, when it comes exam time, it's just going to blow up. So what we do is we kind of try to hone in on that one subject or two or three subjects, or that particular sub-subject that you're not quite strong in. You're going to get to see those questions a lot more often through our system.
That's pretty cool. So I see there's different levels of difficulty that you can go through these practice exams. Do you set the difficulty level yourself, or does it progressively get more and more difficult the further you advance?
One interesting thing about what we do is that every question that's answered gives you the right if you get it right. It gives you the right if you get it wrong. And then also, either way, it'll give you qualifying information. It'll give you where that question came from. It'll give you a little bit of blurb from the instruction that says this is why that question is right. And then you move on. But before you move on, you determine whether or not you want to see that question again soon or later. And so that's really the difficulty level, is you determine, hey, this was difficult for me, or this is something I'd like to see later. So you click that, and that's where we give the users that control over their own quiz experience, is that they get to determine which subjects they see more often.
And that's pretty cool. So are most of these questions definitive questions, or are they more subjective in terms of like behavioral?
They are absolutely definitive. The exam that we take for the Navy-wide advancement exam, the whole test is similar to an SAT. It's got right answers, it's got wrong answers, but it also has more right answers than this one that may be right, but it's not the rightest.
Got it. Yeah. So how many different categories make up this test or this exam platform?
It varies in your pay grade, and it also varies in the community, the rate that you're in. So right now we focus on the corpsman community, the medics of the Navy, because they encompass the largest subset of the Navy. So that's where we started, and they have anywhere between 7 to 10 topics, and then within each topic they have about 3 to 4 subtopics.
Mm. Okay, so now you have to help me here. Corpsman and FMF corpsman, are they the same, or do they have to know different things?
Actually, you have to know the exact same thing, but it's just
Okay,
kind of where you find yourself in that rate. You can be sent to a duty station with the Marines, and maybe the next time you get sent to a hospital that's all Navy.
got it. That's very cool. So, are you guys looking at expanding Blue Jacketeer to encompass more of the different elements of the Navy above and beyond corpsman, or are you just gonna just hone in and continue to progress on the corpsman side of things?
Well, I think a little bit of both. The first thing, and when I approached Alan a long time ago, he was presenting his information to ETs, to a very small subset of the Navy, and in our discussions, he kind of transitioned into the corpsman community so that he can hone the product and the infrastructure in a way that's scalable. And so in a business model, if you have this one thing and then you can just change it from red to purple to blue to every other color, but it's the same product process and everything else, then that's kind of where we want to be, is we want to hone that product and then just call it a different thing, get different people inputting different questions, but we want to hone the product and the process first before we expand.
Is Blue Jacketeer in any way associated with or accredited by the Navy?
It is not.
Are you planning on pursuing that, or do you think that just might add a lot of red tape to your process?
I don't think that the Navy is looking for a product like ours to provide that service to sailors. I think they're fine with sailors finding their own way to this information.
Okay, that makes sense. How many people have gone through this course or have used it and then taken the exam and provided you feedback and said, yes, this helped, no, it didn't, or I could have done? I mean, what kind of feedback have you gotten so far?
So to your metrics question, we've had about 1,000 subscribers to the portion of the website that is rate specific to the corpsman. And then beyond that, we've had users use the BMR section, which every sailor has to know the basic military requirements. And so um, the feedback we've received is very positive, and it just really gives us encouragement as we kind of hone the product, like I said. So, and they've also given us suggestions like, hey, I'd really like this, or this worked for me. And we've kind of listened to our audience, which I think is really important in business. And we've said, you know what, if the user is looking for this, let's provide them that service. And so recently we've launched the Blue Jacketeer podcast, which is just a voice option where we have our reader. He goes through a topic, which is each chapter of the Corpsman Manual. He'll do a chapter overview that he's written, that he's kind of gleaned that information from. And then after that, we have a guy who asks you questions, gives you the answer. So that if you're driving to work, you can get a chapter a day. And with 25 chapters, you can in a month, you can cover every chapter of the Corpsman Manual.
Oh, that's cool, man. I really like that. Yeah. And I'm looking here. It looks like the BMR, the basic military
Requirements.
requirement, is free.
Yep.
That includes the study straight from your bib, learn faster, remember longer, multiple choice questions, traditional flashcard questions, acronyms and meanings, additional side notes, and more. And that's all free. And you're really not getting into the paid stuff until you combine the BMR plus the HM study guide,
Right.
correct? That's really, and even at that, it looks like an annual subscription is $29.99. And are you constantly adding new material to that and honing it, or?
We are. Every exam cycle is different. So the exam is built, about 3 exams are built each year, or a series of questions are edited each year. So what we do is we have a couple writers who go through those instructions as they've been updated and just check to see which questions are out of date or how they need to be tweaked in certain ways. And we're always adding information.
Yeah, because I can imagine if the Navy is anything like the Army, you've got regulations and instructions and all of that changes pretty regularly. You've got your core stuff that just kind of never seems to change, but you've got a lot more new stuff that's constantly being tweaked and added and changed. So I'd imagine that's probably a pretty large undertaking, huh?
Right.
So let's talk numbers again. So, in terms of your database, like how many questions do you? I don't expect you to know this exact number, but just ballpark. What kind of size of database you got in terms of number of questions?
We have about 3,000 questions, give or take. And then for the BMR, that comes straight from an instruction that offers a quiz at the end. So it really is just a different way to get that question or that quiz to you.
That's awesome. Do you also have a counterpart community, like a Facebook group or anything that these Navy folks want to go to and kind of connect, network, communicate about their experiences and questions, and kind of help each other along? Does that exist?
Absolutely. I think social media is very important. I think today's sailor expects that any business is on social media and does it very well. You're going to see Starbucks. You're going to see certain people that will tweet from KFC or something like that. And I think it's really important for sailors to see that we are people. We don't hide our names, and we come on podcasts and mention it, specifically. So yeah, we have a Facebook group called Blue Jacketeer, and we're always posting things that are basic. Now, we do post certain corpsman related specific information, but in general, everything that we offer is just kind of feeding the user and how to make a better exam cycle.
That's awesome. Wow, I'm really impressed with everything that you and your partner have been able to kind of do and pull together. Um, I'm very encouraged by this. I really think that there's a lot of room for growth if you're to expand it, outwards
Absolutely.
from what you have. But then you could always expand it even further. So, well, I'm just looking at it from a business perspective, right? In terms of growth opportunity, I could very very easily see how you could almost have, if you wanted to, you could have like an Army and a Marine Corps and a Coast Guard arm to Blue Jackets here if you have the right people in place. But the reason I say that is because the I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing this here, but I would imagine that the infrastructure is probably the most difficult hurdle in this business model, and it looks like you've nailed that down pretty well. Gathering information and doing all that's really just labor intensive from a time perspective,
Right.
but not really from a technical perspective. Have you and your partner thought about expanding this into other branches?
We've had many discussions about where to go, and you talk about the business model. We have verticals, as some would call it, but then I also like to think that we have horizontals that we should think about first, is ways that we could increase the level or the product in such a way that sets us up so that we can shift left or right. If the Navy certainly says, hey, we're not going to do this anymore, or you know the quiz questions aren't working, we can shift left to podcasts. Maybe that's where people need to go, or visual aids and such. So we have enough horizontals, and then they can grow as they need to. But in fact, the Air Force has a very vibrant um, market in these quizzes. And if you go onto the App Store, you can find that the Air Force has some of the highest um, grossing paid applications in the education space, and that's because it's one of the best value propositions in the game. And that's what I think from a business perspective. That's why I like being in this business, because I can tell a sailor, look, if you put your mind to it, if you use our product, if you study and make yourself a better candidate, and you get advanced, that's sometimes $200 a month extra. And
Mm-hmm.
so when someone says to me, well, hey, this should be free, you're fleecing sailors, I tell them, look, you know who irons their uniform anymore, right? I take my uniform down to a dry cleaner. I buy plastic shoes so they're always shiny. There's ways that I spend money to make myself a better candidate in the military, and this is
Mm-hmm.
just another way. But to trade $29.99 a year for an opportunity at 200 per month, I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and it would be different. It would be a different story if this was geared towards like your first exam, like your was it E3 to E4, but you've got modules that go from E3 to E4, 4 to 5, 5 to so. I mean, you could use this tool as a study device, as a study tool for years as you're progressing through the ranks. And let's face it, folks. The worst time to study for your advancement test is, the week before you go take it. You know what I
You're
mean?
right.
This is something that you should really, I mean, as soon as you advance into that E5 position, you should really start studying, for your next advancement exam. I mean, that's just the way, if you're going to do it smart, that's the way you do it. Because you never know, you might have opportunities to advance quicker.
Right.
You'll already be ready for it. And not only that, but when I was in the Army, we didn't have advancement exams per se. We did have evaluation exams that we had to take every year. And I don't even know if that's Army wide or if that was just specific to MOSs. But in my MOS, I was a forward observer, and we had to take an annual exam. And wasn't more. It wasn't just an exam. There was an exam included, but it was like a 3-day event. We had to take an exam. We had to do PT test. We had to go to the weapons qualification range. We had to do dismounted land navigation course, a mounted land navigation course. We had to do, set up an OE254 antenna, load ComSec into radios and achieve radio communication. So there's like a whole set of evaluations that spanned three days. And of course, one of the biggest ones, of course, was the written exam. And very similar to your program, depending on what rank you were, like the exam was like let's say 200 questions. And if you were an E1 through E4, you had to take, questions 1 through 30, for example.
Okay.
And if you were E5, then you had to take, through question 40 and so on and so forth. And I always train my guys. I train my guys to take every question all the way up through the E7 rank. And at the time, my guys were like, they thought I was just being an ass. But they didn't really kind of like me for it. But at the end, my guys studied and studied and studied. We all studied together and studied as a team. And they went in, and I forced them to take the entire exam from start to finish, all the way through the E7 rank. And I didn't care if they were an E3 or an E4. And they did. And it turned out that some of my E4s actually scored better on the E7 portion than the E7s that actually took the exam.
Wow.
And it just set them up for promotion opportunities
Right.
in terms of Soldier of the Month boards, Soldier of the Quarter boards, promotion boards, things like that. So I guess the takeaway there is knowledge is power,
Mm-hmm.
and being more knowledgeable. And not only that, but I can really see how this could kind of help. I don't know, maybe indoctrinate's the wrong word, but at least get the sailor's mind kind of in that learning training mindset. So when they get out of the Navy and they continue their education in college or university, they're already used to that kind of that pace, right? That learning, that exam taking. So it's not like a fresh, oh my God, now I got to figure out how to study and how to memorize and how to all those things that come along with learning. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, wow, man, time flies. We're already at our limit. Is there anything that you wanted to cover or talk about that I perhaps missed asking you?
What? I just want to make it a point to encourage anyone who's listening and anyone who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or even transitioning out of the military. Some people, they transition and they think, hey, I didn't hit 20, or maybe they're high year tenured out, they're pushed out, forced out, and they think of that as a failure. And I'd just encourage anyone who thinks that way to just stop. You know, uh, because I've used failure to give me a leg up from my competition before, and business is no different. I learned from my mistakes, I learned from my failures. I failed buds, I failed in my first entrepreneur adventure. So I'm where I am because of my failures. And if you're getting out of the military or you're transitioning, don't think of it as a negative experience. Think of what you can take from the military and put it toward your civilian life. And in my mind, I have like this switch. If not, something's eventual, if something's going to happen, my mind switches. So if I'm going to get deployed, my mind switches. I don't worry too much like, oh man, it sucks that I'm getting deployed, because it's going to happen. So I prepare
Hmm.
myself for that. So transitioning is no different. If you know you're transitioning, turn that mindset as soon as possible so that you're not waiting to the last minute to say, hey, what should I do? Or maybe I should actually call this school that I think I'm going to get into.
I love it. So, last question, as you know, I like to ask all my guests a closing question. And as you know, this podcast is called Change Your POV or Point of View. Give us an example or a scenario of a time when you believed or thought something one way, but an event or circumstance occurred that forced you to see it from a different perspective. What was it, and what did you learn from that experience?
So I have kind of this idea or this mantra. It's called I, not why. And as soon as you get in the military, you're told, hey, you say I, got it. I'm going to do this. Whatever you tell me, I'm going to do that. I remember jumping into the ocean in my dress white uniform and thinking to myself, well, this is stupid. But it serves a purpose in the military. There are places where that serves a purpose, but in the Navy, on shore duty, when you're in a safe environment, that why becomes important. And I thought for so long that, those people, that generation Y, who are asking this question, hey, why do we have to do this? I thought, wow, they're whining, you know. But I became a leader, and I decided, as I was growing in my own leadership, my leaders were telling me, hey, this is why I made this decision. And it really gave me insight as to what I would do if I were in that position. I could tell myself, hey, I wouldn't do that because this is why they thought that way. And that was really my change of point of view, is that I'm okay with someone asking why. we're in a warfighting organization. If we're downrange and, if we're going into battle, okay, maybe not ask why, but there are certain circumstances, and certainly in the civilian community, where if you ask why, you're going to get a response, or you're due a response that builds you as a person and as a leader.
I love it, man. Hey, this has been a very inspirational conversation with you, and I learned a lot, not just about the Navy, but about myself and about you as well. And I'm really anxious and excited to kind of follow along with your progress
Sure.
and keeping in touch with you, and just and providing some updates further down the road. Perhaps maybe next time you and I and your partner can hop on and we can kind of talk about things that are going on.
Absolutely.
So if anyone listening wants to check out more, they can obviously go to bluejacketeer.com. But where else can people find you and connect with you?
Well, Facebook is obviously a place where you can go. You can find our Facebook page. We go through everything that we think is needed. And then also you can email us at support@bluejacketeer.com, or any of our, that'll go to any of our websites or our email page.
Awesome. Very cool. Hey, thanks, Johnny, for coming on, man. I appreciate your knowledge and your can-do attitude.
Absolutely.
And, I enjoy the time that you're in, because when you get out, you will miss it. Trust me, I've been there. All right. You can find all the show notes for everything that we talked about on this episode by heading over to changeyourpov.com/episode 56. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. We have a lot more great content headed your way. If you want to reach out and contact me directly, you can email me at eddie@changeyourpov.com. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Change Your POV podcast with Eddie Lazary. Check out more content by going to changeyourpov.com. And remember, your ability and willingness to change your point of view will open doors of opportunity.